Hey, I'm Jennifer Page, and you're watching Eclectic Arts Media.
I hope all my experiences are like this. I mean, I've been blessed thus far with all the projects, especially this one, to have such an amazing time shooting it. I mean, apparently I do darkness and death really well, so I don't tell happy stories yet.
When I did the vocals for the chorus of the Phantom of the Opera.
Hello!
Hi, Chloe. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
Someone was just leaving the bar with a beer, and then there was this opening, and I just felt myself climbing onto the bar.
It feels kind of like we were laughing about it last night, a family band in a way, because, you know, and that's really exciting as well because, you know, it feels a little bit more like home when you're on tour and stuff.
I mean, even the thought of it seemed insane, but I thought, yeah, maybe let's give it a go.
I wanted to look exactly like they looked on the cover with their big perm hair and their chokers and like they were so badass and so cool.
It's wild. That stuff really starts to creep up on you.
And the moment I stepped into the ring, I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
And you're watching Eclectic Arts Media.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark Sugiyama from Eclectic Arts Media, based here in Seattle, Washington. And thank you so much for joining me on this Monday, April 29th, 2024. And before we get to things, I'd like to thank Marika Hasse for joining me last Tuesday. It's nice catching up with her. It's been just over 2 years since we did our first live stream interview. So we talked for quite a while. It was almost an hour and a half with that one in particular. And speaking of which, coming up this Thursday, the 2nd of May at noon Pacific, I'm scheduled to also have somebody come back from the adult world. Sky Blue is scheduled to come back. And we did one, her first one was in September of 2022. So I'm looking forward to catching up with Sky. And I know she's been doing a lot of work in those last, almost 2 years. And she's got a real interest in art and things where we kind of crisscross with our background. So I'm looking forward to catching up with her. And then next week, it's hard to believe it's already May. On the 8th of February, on the 8th of May, which is Wednesday, we're still working out the time. Halcon Negro, the luchador, is expected to come back. We already worked out the day. We just did one about 2 weeks ago, and he had a time constraint going on, but we're trying to find one that he has more open-ended time because we barely scratched the surface with his wonderful background as a professional wrestler. He's also a huge music guy, just like I am, and concerts. So we were like, man, we could probably talk forever. So we have the date. He's just trying to make sure that everything's good with the schedule where he can have at least an hour to talk. So that's next Wednesday. And then I've got a few other live streams also kind of in the works, and I've got some things in person and events coming up. I have some concerts that I'll be covering. I've got films that I'm supposed to be watching and reviewing. And so if this is your first time joining me on my YouTube channel, if you do me a huge favor, please hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell. Give the video a thumbs up. Any kind of interaction, we know it helps the algorithm. And if you're over on the Twitch side of things, if you could follow me over there, that's great. I know my guest has also shared this out, so her followers are having a chance to watch this. So this is wonderful to have some extra folks in the chat today. And excuse me. I also want to thank Christopher for being my third donation this year. I kind of mentioned of this probably a month ago that I hadn't received a donation yet this year. And lo and behold, Ken came through, and then Stacy came through, and then Christopher just last week made a sizable donation. What I do the service that I use actually costs me money. So the donations go right back into that, helps me buy new backdrops, anything else. So if you're ever interested in making a tip or a donation, there's a PayPal link and a Venmo in my YouTube description. It's also on my Twitch page. It's a little hard to find over on Twitch, but it is there. And that's only if you're in a position to do so. But I greatly appreciate the support because I'm a one-man band. I don't have anything that I'm connected to website-wise, newspapers, magazines. I'm the one who does everything. And just a little bit of quick background. Eclectic Arts started out in 2011 as a fanzine for musicians, and then it started to grow into just this kind of, not to toot my own horn, but just kind of juggernaut. I really never would have imagined that I'd be doing all these film things and with the opera and the ballet and theater and musicals and just kind of anything that I consider artistic. With the adult world, that started with interviews in 2021, but I actually interviewed a few performers prior to that, but that was in written form, which is on my blog, which is also connected to my YouTube channel and also on Twitch as well. So there's lots of stuff out there. So once you're done with this, if you want to kind of poke around and see what I'm up to or what I'm all about, you kind of see that I try to live up to the name of Eclectic Arts. So I don't like to be pigeonholed as any one thing. If you have questions, you can obviously ask them through the YouTube channel. You can ask them through Twitch. I'll try to fold those into our conversation as we go along. And we'll kind of go from there. All right. My guest today is turning heads in the world of adult entertainment. She has worked with several well-known studios, including Nubiles, Reality Kings, and Lethal Hardcore, just to name a few. She is active online via OnlyFans, Fansly, Playboy, Chatterbait, Twitch, and many others. Please welcome to the Eclectic Arts Media Virtual Studio, Miss Selena Ivy. Hello.
Hello. Hello, Mark.
How are you?
I am just peachy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you get the distinction of being the first guest that actually has shared out to her own channel.
You know, it's funny because I haven't streamed. I used to stream on Twitch so often, and I actually haven't streamed on Twitch in probably a couple years. So this is like the first time. Super random, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay, well, that's cool. So that means people that are following you on Twitch to be like, hey, she's live right now, and then be like, what is this?
Yeah.
Okay, and Ove, good
surprises.
to see. Yeah, Ove, good to see. Ove's someone that follows me over in Norway, so he's over there right now checking this thing out. So let's kind of start all over the place. And please forgive me if I keep rambling. I've been up since 12:30 this morning, so my brain's not maybe as sharp as it usually is.
Well, you look well rested.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
What I wanted to start with was that I know that you actually were just at Exotica in Chicago. And so have you done conventions before? And also, what was that experience like when you were just the one that you just did?
I did Exotica in New Jersey, and that was my very first one this last year. That was a lot of fun. It was surprising because I feel like at the time I am still kind of new, but I was very, very new. I had just gotten with an agent. I was kind of like just starting to be more, I guess, official in the industry. And I don't know, it was an experience. And then I was surprised that it kind of went as well as it did, because, you know, there's a lot of upfront cost with that. So to put that much into it, and then, you know, it's like people are actually coming in your booth, people are actually buying stuff. It's like the kind of the reality check of, oh, okay, I'm here. It's pretty cool. Okay. And then I did AVN and XBiz, and those were a lot of fun. I felt like they were a lot bigger as far as the population. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Okay, I like that you touched on the reality aspect of doing a convention, that there's upfront costs, especially if you're starting out and you're trying to get your name established, get people out there, and if they're coming by your booth, you're kind of like, you know, you're one of many. And yeah. So it's like there could be some nerve-wracking moments, a little bit of like, are people going to want to buy stuff? Are they want to get a selfie with me? Are they going to want to even talk to me? And then when you start seeing it happen, it's like, okay, cool. This is why I'm here. Yeah. And I mean, I know there's some of the actors that have done conventions and some of the pop culture people I've talked to. Some people, especially if you're more on the introverted side, they know that they want to do the conventions because they like meeting their fans, but it also is really, really stressful to them because there's nothing to hide behind. It's like they're like literally right there. And typically you're going to have really, really good interactions. But just the fact that in the back of their head, they're thinking, well, what if nobody shows up or nobody wants to talk to me or nobody wants to get in my line? It's like, no, trust me, people will be there.
There was definitely that fear there. Like, okay, what if I did all this and it's for nothing?
Yeah, and I think that's only natural. So that's got to be really good. As you know, one person comes and another person comes, and
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. And so when you were doing the one in Chicago recently, was it kind of the same type of thing, or is it because you've been in the industry a little bit longer now that you have people distinctly that were there for you?
Yeah, it was exciting.
Okay. And we'll get into other things, everybody, as we're talking, but do you have other conventions coming up on the next X amount of months?
I'm planning on doing the Exotica in Miami, and then I'd like to go to all of them. I don't think I'm gonna go to, what is it? There's one that's like mainly for creators in Miami. I won't be going to that one. I think that one's XBiz Miami. I'll be going to Exotica in Miami, and then probably whatever Exoticas come after that, and then yeah, there's no like set in stone plan, but I've really been doing my best not to miss them.
Okay, so it sounds like with you making doing these conventions, do you already kind of have like something mapped out in your head of like, this is what I want to do to kind of build my brand as Selena Ivy, as being in the adult side of the industry, or you just kind of like organically just kind of taking it wherever it kind of fits into your schedule?
Yeah, that's I think that's more accurate.
Okay, so it's like, well, I think I got time for this one. I know it's coming up. I'd like to be there, and if I can,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll make it happen.
Yeah, so like I'm definitely trying, but at the same time, I'm very much just kind of, there's a sense of going with the flow, and I feel like what's meant will work out. So if I can be like what is it? If I can kind of work towards that, and there's like a, you know what I'm sorry, the the words are not coming to me right now. There's definitely some initiation on my part, but as far as it working out, I just kind of let it be.
Okay, so it's like, so you have some level of intention then, that I'd like to be at these things, and then hopefully they kind of work out with my schedule. But it's not like I have to make sure I hit this one, this one, this one, this one, and I'm going to change everything around my world, because then you don't really have a lot of balance in your life either if you're trying to get to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true for, I mean, any guest. I think when they're doing convention appearances and they're trying to do scenes and they're trying to have a personal life and just anything else, you spend too much time in one area, then you start getting burnt out on it.
It's a very consuming industry in that way, for sure.
Yeah, and I've had many of the guests tell me about as much as they love meeting the fans from all industries, that that's an emotional stress. Just somebody kind of say, "Hey, I'm a big fan of yours." That's great; they love it. But then if you have 100 people tell you that, it's kind of like they're pulling that energy from you, and then they want to go home for the next day and just not not do anything because they're exhausted from it.
Yeah. I don't know if I've had that experience yet, but there's not like hundreds of people coming to me, so we'll see if that changes when I get there. But I personally, I really like having that time to see people and get to meet people and get to know people and having that one-on-one interaction with them.
Okay, well, and also, I mean, you've done so much work online too, so you're used to talking with your fans and having exchanges, and so moving into the in-person part isn't as big of a jump for you as maybe for some other people that are just like.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like it keeps me like it's kind of what drives me to keep doing what I'm doing.
That makes sense, especially when you get a chance to know this is your fan base, and that you can't wait to do, you can't wait for your fans to see this new scene that you just did, or something, some content for your OnlyFans or something that you're going to be putting out. Then you kind of know, well, here's one of my subscribers, and here's another person. I just met you at this convention. So then, what's your feedback like? What do you think of that I just put out? And then they can directly tell you that you'll have a face going with the name and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I'm an old fart. So back in my day, they didn't have anything like that. You wouldn't be interacting with someone's videotape, that you're watching later. So it's very, very different and much, much better. This, I think for everybody.
It's more personal experience, I think.
Absolutely. It's so far removed from what it used to be like that. If you were just watching something, for the most part, that's all you saw. You wouldn't run into that person unless you actually made a travel plan to go to one of maybe 3 conventions they had in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And also now it's much more readily available. People it's not this huge taboo. It's still got a taboo to a certain extent, but it's not like what it was back in like the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, you do what and you want to be where? It's like, you're going to go meet who at this book signing or whatever. And like, now it's kind of like, oh yeah, people in the adult world are crossing over into the mainstream world all the time for music videos and album covers and things of that nature. For people that are joining us, I think they were kind of saying earlier, they didn't know what was going on because all of a sudden you're live after X amount of months or years, like you were saying.
It's been years. So hello everybody, welcome back.
Yeah, so again, I'm Mark from Eclectic Arts, and I'm up here in Seattle, and we're doing this live stream. And Selena was nice enough to share it out through her Twitch channel. So that's why all your followers that have been wondering what happened or just hoping that you're going to come back, that's what's going on. So what you normally would be doing, I don't know if were you doing like gaming stuff when you were doing Twitch?
Mm-hmm. I would play a lot of first-person shooters. I had, at the time, I didn't really have like a big space or like environment to work in. I still really don't, which is why I've kind of taken a hiatus from streaming, but I do plan on coming back. It's just, there's been a lot going on over the past few years, and then I had this big transition of career, because at the time I wasn't even doing OnlyFans when I was streaming on Twitch. It was just completely different.
Okay, yeah, and I see that I should have noticed that you're in a gaming chair right now that you're sitting in.
I am.
Okay. So that's kind of interesting then. So that you just said that when you were streaming on Twitch that you weren't even on OnlyFans at that point. So is it kind of like these worlds are kind of all colliding together then? Like your Twitch gaming world and your adult world?
I don't know if you watch Seinfeld, but there's a whole like, the worlds are colliding, Jerry, and I just feel that all the time.
I totally know that was George talking about that, trying to keep things separate with his fiance and yeah.
It was too draining though. I felt, because especially at the time I was dancing in Atlanta, but I didn't even, like, my viewers didn't even know that. I was very, okay, because I didn't want people to see me differently, even though I was still a sex worker at the time. I didn't want people to be coming into my chat and like that being their main focus, when I wanted to create like a wholesome community of little gamer nerds. And well, I just threw that out the window.
Okay, and I see. Hi, Susan. Good to see you, Susan. Someone that I used to work with at my Muggle job back in, I don't know, 2016, 2017. So when you're talking about that you had your gaming world, and then you had your dancing at the time, then you threw it out the window. Did you just get kind of tired of it? So, you know what? I don't give a shit. I'm going to have everything just kind of crisscross over.
Let's see what happened. Because it's been a couple years. So during COVID, that was kind of when I stopped. I had gotten really sick, and then I ended up moving involuntarily, having to move. And then when I finally got like settled in, I never really got settled in. I still haven't really gotten settled in. Like, there's still boxes piled up to the ceiling. I was kind of forced into a move that I wasn't really anticipating. And it was just a lot of like negative stuff that kind of happened at once. So in that time, when I had started my OnlyFans, I kind of realized, you know what, I don't want to like, I already have this audience, and part of what I wanted with my I guess my platform was I wanted authenticity of, just, but I felt very hypocritical in the sense that I wanted this authenticity, but at the same time I was hiding this really big part of my life and myself. So I kind of just ended up saying fuck it.
Okay. I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate to what you're talking about if you're trying to present something really authentic, and yet you had this other piece that you're like not too sure about. Do I incorporate this? Do I not? For myself, right out of college, I was working as a teacher. So clearly, families and parents, if they found out, and some parents would have no problem if I'm into like a really extreme heavy metal or something. And then other people are going to be like, you listen to what? And you don't show that stuff at school, do you? In your classroom, or you don't have a poster of it. And like I had a big subway poster of Metallica and some other stuff, and the kids thought it was cool. But then I also had one parent that did look at it, and she was like, "Why is that on your in your classroom?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have a guitar club after school on Thursdays, and I'm a guitar player, and so it's just one of the extensions of me. So now the students have a better feel for who I am." And she had a huge problem with it, And so then moving forward, I'm thinking, as I became a photographer and working with models, I'm like, should I keep it off in the corner over there so people don't, think or misconstrue it some way? And I did. I didn't tell people for the longest time, and I didn't like that because it was a part of me. So I know how hard that can be. And then I got to a point where I'm like, especially as my level job changed and I got out of the education business, then I'm like, you know what? Where I'm at now, people aren't going to care. They're not going to care if I'm doing this or that or the other thing. So I'm like, yeah, I was telling everybody, and they're like, oh, that's really cool that you do these kind of things. I'm like, all right. And then
There's
some people
definitely that like criticism and judgment there in that realm for sure.
There is, and you know what? And truth be told, full transparency, when I started interviewing guests from the adult world doing these live streams, I got some real bad feedback from certain publicists that were working with me in like the film industry, mainstream film industry, music publicists, because they're like, Mark, I personally don't have a problem with what you're doing, but my clients will. And I was like, you know what? I knew that before I decided to do it. And I was like, I'm going to do it anyway, because I think it's something I want to do. I think it's something that's misunderstood. And I think there's things that I can't change someone's opinion, but I can at least try to bring out what I think should be brought out. And then you can form your own opinion, whichever way that is. But you're not going to stop me from doing it.
Yeah. That's very admirable, like to just stick to it and keep doing, because I think it takes people, like for example, I feel like it takes, the Cardi B's of the world to kind of normalize stripping, to like it takes these crossovers, even though there comes with a lot of judgment and, preconceived notions. It's important, I think, for the overall well-being and greater good of society. So you, sir, are doing the Lord's work.
Well, I appreciate it, but I think also like the way, like what you just said, if people didn't know your background, they're like, wow, she's really well spoken, and she's really, they'll say a lot of things. They're like, yeah, she's a person, she's a human being. There's all these facets to everybody, and you can't just, the whole judge a book by its cover kind of thing.
I think in sex work, there's so much of that too, because people just expect you to be like some dumb, this like dumb bimbo-esque persona, and that's so far beyond what so many of us have to offer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And anyone that watches any of the interviews that I've done that are sitting on my YouTube channel with the adult guests, I stand by every one of them. They've been fascinating. They've been funny. They've been really insightful. And as I mentioned to all my guests, I love having guests come back. So when some of the guests have been able to come back, all the newness is gone. You kind of feel, oh yeah, I know what Mark's like and his style is like, and the kind of things he asked last time. So I felt I was respected, and we kind of went in all kinds of weird directions that I wasn't expecting, which was kind of fun for them. And I see that a lot of people are kind of talking about, they can relate to what we're talking about when there's always going to be these people that are looking at what you're doing or what you're presenting and having an opinion about it or having an attitude about it. They want to voice that opinion to you, especially with like social media these days. I've said this many, many times that if I wasn't doing Eclectic Arts Media, I don't think I would be on social media. And personally, I wouldn't be on it because it's just, it can be good when it works well. Don't get me wrong. But there's this other side to it that people automatically have a platform when maybe they shouldn't have one.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that. If it wasn't for Twitch or my adult work, I probably would not touch social media at all. It's not. I'm bad at it.
Well, and so there's something we have in common. Like, I do it because it's something that I need to do. If I didn't post about this, people wouldn't even know that was going on. That kind of thing. Obviously, you had built up your Twitch following, quite a bit over those years with all the.
I still don't know how that happened, but thanks, guys.
But you know what I found, like with people that I follow, it could be, and if they're not even doing gaming stuff, if they're doing cooking lessons, they're doing whatever, it really comes down to the person. It comes down to their personality and how they kind of come across, and that's what kind of brings somebody back to it. Yeah, it's nice if they're playing a game that they're interested in or something like that. But I mean, if you didn't have like a personable personality, or if you seem like, I don't know, just kind of a bitch or something, I don't think people would be coming back and hitting that follow. And just like with me, I was surprised when I first started. I had like 300 followers, and I'm like, I'm not on Twitch but on YouTube, and I'm like, what is? I didn't even know what that number was. That's how I was not paying attention to it. And then people say, oh, Mark, if you get 1,000 subscribers, then you can monetize, and if you get this, I'm like, oh, really? So I started looking into some of these things, but it wasn't the reason I was doing it. It's like, no, I have an interest in talking to people from all kinds of artistic backgrounds. And then, eventually the audience will come to me. But I wasn't saying like it needs to come to me. Just, eventually it will.
Yeah, I fully relatable.
And Ove was putting I see he put a Seinfeld quote of "A world divided against itself cannot stand," from that episode where the world was colliding. And I see Susan's talking about, especially as an Asian female who worked with metal bands, that got disowned, and others assumed that she was a groupie when they saw her just being a female in that world.
It's really funny that you mentioned that, because I definitely, I grew up in a very anti, no tattoos, no hair color, no metal. It just absolutely, and that's a big part of. I don't have any tattoos and I don't have any piercings, and growing up with that, it was so preached to me that you can't you can't look this way, you can't look like this person. So I'm convinced that when I'm 30, I'm just gonna have a full-on alt meltdown, and I'm gonna dye my hair, and I'm gonna get all the piercings and all the tattoos. It's gonna be such an extreme. But you're not alone in you're not alone in that.
Okay, so that brings up something interesting then. If you were raised in a conservative household, it sounds like, where these things you don't do, so do people in your circle know what you do from the sex work side of things then?
Yeah. So, well, okay. Yes and no. My family doesn't really know. My brother knows. My parents don't know. My aunt, some of my extended family knows. I don't really have a big family. So, and then I would say at least 50% knows.
Okay.
And then my friends, they were really supportive about me going into it.
It's interesting that everyone that has a different path of what brought them to sex work. I don't think any two are the same. And sometimes if that question gets asked, then you'll have some people say, oh yeah, everybody knows. And other people only a few people know. And talk about reactions. Yeah, my mom was super supportive, but then, my dad didn't want anything to do with me, or vice versa. So it's always kind of interesting, how things get perceived, especially when you talk about, again, coming from no tattoos, piercings, that kind of thing. And I don't know about people that are watching right now, but for me personally, if I'm watching a performer, I'm not into the alt look in porn. I realize it's a huge subgenre and niche where, you know, someone's got tatted up all over and they've got piercings everywhere. On a personal level, it's great. I mean, I've got tattoos, but I'm kind of like when I watch, I'm like, if you have some, it's fine. But so I don't know if you're going to hopefully hold off before you get all inked up.
I think, I mean, so sex work has definitely warped my perception of, since I started dancing really young, you know, my parents always preached I don't know, I don't want to call it this because it sounds like I'm dogging on like the alternative look, but the clean girl look. There's like a stereotype there. So they always preached that to me. And then since I became a dancer pretty much straight out of high school, I didn't have any of those things, but everyone else around me did. All the other, like, you know, teen girls did. They had tattoos or piercings or whatever. And I noticed that was something that really benefited me not having those things in that industry, because it was almost like it was a rarity to meet a girl that didn't, like, that was kind of all natural and didn't have any enhancements of any kind. And since that was like one of the things that kind of separated me in a financially beneficial manner in that realm, it just kind of stuck. And modeling was always something that I wanted to do, and porn was always something that I wanted to do. And I'd always heard that if you know, it's going to be harder if you have these things. So that was just something that was like kind of in the background, validating the parental concerns that my parents had. But it stuck, and like it kind of worked out in my favor. I don't plan on doing that stuff anytime soon, but I think I'm definitely going to have like a midlife crisis. And not saying that like that's the only reason that people do it. I just, you know, when you're feel held back from things for a long time, you tend to go a little crazy when the opportunity presents itself.
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. That actually did work in your favor. So it's kind of weird how things worked out.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I worked with models for almost 10 years as a photographer, and so getting a model that came through that didn't have any ink whatsoever on them was rare. And so in many cases, it didn't matter because the outfits they were wearing was covering it up anyway. But if we're getting more revealing, then it's like, well, there's this. But then every now and then there'd be like this unicorn that would come by. It was like, oh, there's no ink on you. Anyway, we don't have to try to cover it or hide it or do anything like that. Or in some cases, accentuated if it really was something that was a beautiful piece on them. So yeah, you're absolutely right that finding somebody that doesn't have that is it's a rarity. So you want to exploit that rarity as much as you can for financial reasons or career reasons.
Well, you know, it's funny because I keep hearing that having a lot of tattoos or like having tattoos is a problem in the industry, but then I look at a lot of the girls in the industry, and I especially a lot of the like really successful ones, they all have tattoos. So I'm not really sure like at what point is it too much, you know?
That's a good point, because there definitely have some that they're really inked up, and then they're like at the top, top 10, top 20 of the industry. Mm-hmm. And even like because Sky Blue's supposed to be coming on Thursday, she's only got 2 small ones that I can think of, but she still has them. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes like she gets 5 more. If she gets a sleeve, is that too much? If she gets something on her neck, is that too much? Or yeah, kind of a weird thing. It's almost like maybe if you're already your foundation is established with your fan base, then maybe you can keep on getting stuff and they'll kind of be accepting of it. Then if you just kind of came in there and you're already deemed an alternative model.
Yeah. But, that I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think people, they tend to get more like as they've established themselves. So that makes sense.
And that means, so when you have your meltdown, you'll be fine.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, your fans are like, oh, that's fine. We've been supporting her for years, so it's all good.
That would be such a blessing.
Yeah, and I mean, I realize, like you said, this might be down the road, but either tattoo wise or piercing wise, do you have any ideas off the top of your head what you might want to get first?
So I really wanted to, I think I'm probably going to stick to wigs for this, but I've always wanted to dye my hair. I really want like half burgundy and then half like dark, like a dark like navy blue silver. And then, so I'm going to start a rock band and validate that transition further. I've always wanted to do the Gears of War, the logo for that. It's the game. And then the Dragonborn symbol from Skyrim, like on the back of my neck. There have been, I want to do the Slipknot, like the S. That was not an S. That was like a dollar sign. I don't know why I did that. I think because there's a lot of things that I wanted since I was like a teenager, or like even younger, I think, but that I've never really lost interest in or never like stopped loving or appreciating. I think a lot of those are still kind of up there on my list of things that I'd want to get.
Okay, well that makes sense, because I don't think that stuff necessarily changes if it's something that a band that you really liked for X amount of years, and like, you know, at some point, you know, that band means so much, or a certain song means so much to you. I want to get that lyric on me, or I want to get, you know, something. I could totally understand that.
Music and video games were always such a big foundation of my life and so important to me, and I feel like that while I don't really play anything at the moment or have the time to, you know, contribute to that, it still holds like a lot of meaning and foundation.
Okay, well, and I mean that word is key, foundation. I mean, it's a piece of who you, it's a big piece of who you are then with games and with music. So that, yeah, that will never change. And I see Ove saying that. What's he saying? He's saying, "Oh, tell Selena she's got a beautiful voice. Sounds like velvet."
Thank you. I'm getting over a cold right now, so but thank you.
So yeah, so Ove, imagine when she's completely over her cold, what her voice will sound like. And I like what Ove had said earlier about it's almost like he wishes there was like a test before you could get on social media, like some kind of, you know, thing to make sure that you're gonna kind of, I don't know, not be a jerk, or, you know, just
Yeah,
you know, that kind of thing.
that would be very necessary, I think. Very good.
Yeah, because, you know, obviously anybody can make an account and then they start spewing their stuff. And knock on wood, I haven't had too much of that lately. But there's maybe like 2021. Yeah, I'd be getting DMs all the time, and I'm like, man, don't you have anything better to do? I mean, like, I mean, they would send these big long diatribes, and I'm kind of like, I just look at it and laugh, and, you know, delete, block, move on to the next thing.
There's so many toxic people on the internet. It's scary. The internet scares me. You guys scare me.
And I only got a taste of it. I can only imagine what an attractive young woman would get through DMs and comments and, you know, the kind of things. Like, it was something that really kind of surprised me initially when I saw some of that stuff. I'm like, that, you know, I said something during a live stream and they're taking issue with it. I'm like, geez, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but apparently to you, you want to sit there for 10 minutes and write 5 paragraphs about it. But yeah, you just end up kind of moving on. And I've always been definitely trying to find, you know, the good people. Those are people I keep trying to hang into and make sure they're part of my circle, part of my tribe. And the negative, toxic people, you can go over here. I don't need you around me.
It's funny you say that, because I was actually part of like my part of the solidification that I needed to validate that transition of, okay, the worlds are colliding, was, you know, at the time, even when I wasn't doing OnlyFans, even when I wasn't, you know, when I was like, I streamed in like full, just very modest clothing, and people would still send me stuff and still be in the chat, like saying certain things, and, you know, there's always going to be those people, and it was something that kind of made me realize, you know, don't let that hold you back from the authenticity of yourself.
Yeah, and, you know, it's I think what you said and what you experienced, anyone that's doing this for any length of time, anything, if they're live streaming, if they're on Twitch, if they're on OnlyFans, that if you start building up any level of audience, then there's going to be some detractor coming along. Even if they're just doing just to do it, just to try to fuck your day up or whatever and say something, or see if they can kind of get you off your game. And I always have to kind of remind myself about the exact same thing. It's like, don't let those people stop the momentum of where I'm trying to go with things. They're just going to fall by the wayside. And it's, certain days it's easier said than done. I'm not going to lie and say that stuff doesn't affect me, because it does at times. But at the same time, that's when hopefully there's enough good things and positive things over here that will squash those kind of people in those comments. I see a lot of people are kind of relating to what we're talking about. So that's good. That means we have like-minded people then.
That's good. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, and I want to get back to when you mentioned that games and music were such a big piece of your foundation. Specifically, I'm not a gamer, but on the music side, I'm a huge music nerd. So, what kind of music were you into? What kind of bands that meant a lot to you?
Growing up, I was really into metal and hard rock. So, I liked a lot of the more classical metal and hard rock artists. So, it's not really hard rock, but like the Doors, that's probably the earliest as far as rock. Although I think the Beatles are considered rock. I would put them more in the pop genre, but so I like that. I like Metallica. I like Pantera. I like Slipknot, Lamb of God. A lot of the Breaking Benjamin, like the more alternative rock, I think would be the genre. There's so many subgenres, and I am so unfamiliar with them. And then some of the more modern stuff are like, I don't think it's still called this, but screamo. Those types of bands. I really just like music, and I like a lot of pop and hip hop. But I think metal and rock were like more foundational for me. And then this one's kind of random, but I like big band era. So like the Dorsey Brothers and Bing Crosby, Sinatra, Dean Martin, Ella Fitzgerald, very much older.
That's interesting. With the big band era that you like, where did that come from? Do you know where that come from? Parents or somebody else that was playing, or you just discovered it online somewhere? Or?
So my parents were always much older, and my grandfather was like in his 90s when he passed, and that was fairly recently. So there was, I think there was already an interest in it from them. And then, my mom would sing these songs to me, and they were songs that her mom sang to her from like the Depression. So I think it started from that. And then when I was younger and I started playing video games like Fallout and BioShock, that like really solidified it. So the interest was kind of already there. And then when I heard it in like modern day things that I really took a lot of time with and spent a lot of time with, I think the appreciation for it grew even further, and it was more of a complex interest. It wasn't just from one thing. It seemed to be like a recurring style that came up, and I just kept the interest in it.
Okay, that's especially when you're talking about that. It may have started through different generations in your family, but then when you start hearing it in games, then it started to branch out into something like, okay, this is like something I'm really getting into, because now I'm hearing it in these other applications.
Mm-hmm.
I remember again, because I'm old, that when I saw Iron Maiden in like 2008, and there's all these young kids there, and I was asking my friend he was like 10 years younger than me, and I'm like, why are there all these kids here? I thought it'd be like old people like us. And he said, oh, it was in, I think, Guitar Hero or something. Some of the Maiden tracks are on that. So all these young kids were hearing it from that. Yeah, so that's why they like The Trooper and they like Hallowed Be Thy Name and some other things. I'm like, oh, okay, because that's, again, I'm not a gamer, so I don't understand where they're getting, where they're hearing this from. So ever since then, I'm like, if a younger person is like into something that to me is old, I'm kind of like, okay, so is it in a movie, is it in a TV show, is it in a game? You know, where did it come from? Or again, it may just come from their family that they heard it when they were growing up. So that makes sense. And when you talked about metal and rock, that's me. That was my foundation as a little Asian kid in the suburbs of Seattle. That's what I grew up with. The very first
I mean, that's
band.
pretty hardcore.
The very first band I ever saw was Kiss, and I was 9 years old when
Oh,
I
that's
saw them.
awesome. I'm sure that was an amazing concert.
You know, from what I remember of it, it was the whole experience. And then 1982, I saw AC/DC, I saw Van Halen, I saw Judas Priest, I saw Iron Maiden, I saw all these kind of 80s metal bands. And then Metallica for sure, because I started to play guitar then, so I was learning all the Metallica riffs. Have you seen, like the bands that you mentioned, have you seen any of them live?
So I used to go to Warped Tour, and that was I always had this thing where so I'm 4'10", and for me going to a concert, a lot of times if you're like in the pit as a 4'10" person, that is not fun. Okay. I will get trampled, I will get crushed. All I can see are armpits, and it's not all I can see and smell are armpits, and I don't want that. So I always, whenever I would go to a concert, I would like save up and then I would splurge on being either front row or I'd be all the way in the back. There was no in between for me. And because they were such few and far between as far as opportunity, I'd always go. I would splurge, and I'd want the VIP, go to the front, like meet the band. That was part of the experience for me. So I didn't really go to a lot of concerts, but when I did, it was an amazing experience. I used to go to Warped Tour, so that was like kind of the first concert I ever went to. And Warped Tour, there were a bunch of bands that you would see. And so I saw many there, and then I think Slipknot was kind of my first like singular headline like tour concert that I went to. I saw them live. I saw a band called Ghost Town. That was, I don't think they're together anymore. I saw Marilyn Manson, Ginger. I went to a Ginger concert. That one was a little more recent. Melanie Martinez, I went to one of her concerts. Not metal, but I haven't been to that many concerts, but the few that I have been, they've been very, very good. Very performer. Like, that's a performer.
Okay, no, that's great. I love going to live events, kind of, period. It doesn't really have to be a concert. Again, that's why I cover theater and ballet, live without a net kind of stuff. And when you mentioned that you're 4'10" and trying to be at, like Warped Tour or Slipknot or something, and it's not a good time when I'm 5'5", so I'm not that much taller. And so, yeah, you're like trying to find this little spot between people's shoulders.
Yeah.
And then it lasts for like 2 seconds, and then you get bumped this way, depending on how close you are in the pit. When I was right out of high school, I would be in the pits because that's where my friends were, but then they're all taller than me, so they can kind of deal with it. They can still see stuff. And I could last, I don't know, 15 minutes maybe, depending on how violent it was. And then I have to kind of get to the back and just kind of chill out because, one, I couldn't see anything. Two, I'm getting beat up. So
yeah.
I can totally relate to that. And probably the last time I was ever near a pit was probably Cannibal Corpse. And even then, I'm like, you guys.
I love them.
Yeah, they're awesome. I've interviewed Alex Webster, the bass player, and Rob, one of the guitar players. I've met all of those guys more than once. Super down-to-earth dudes. If you ever get a chance to meet them or see them at a show, they're just like anybody walking down the street. I mean, there's no pretense to them whatsoever. They're some of my favorite people that I've ever met from bands. But yeah, with the fans, and I know going into it, the pit's going to be crazy, and that means I'm on the outside of it. I'll just shove you back into it. I'm not going to get. That's about as close as I'm going to get. And if I'm really not feeling it, then I'll be even further back. But I don't even have to touch you. So, but I go to. I would just at Leve. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a really popular. Her vocals are jazz for sure, and she's got like a classical background. But that was totally a seated type of thing. But there's like high school kids there. Her audience is super, super young. And then, so I felt really out of place being at that show. And anyone that was my age were parents that brought their kids there because their kids wanted to go see the show. So I'm like,
Oh, wow.
Okay, well, I don't have kids, but at least I have somebody kind of my age. And even those parents are probably younger than me. But the show was fantastic though. So I didn't care. That's why I went. So that's great that you've checked out some live music. Of different genres too. I don't think anybody really does this these days, but like when I was growing up, it was kind of like, well, you like certain genres, and if you like these other ones, people thought you were a poser and that kind of thing. It's like you just kind of like what you like. That's the way I look at it now. And if I was a younger person, I wouldn't want somebody like me telling me, you know what, that band stinks or they suck or whatever. It's like, I don't want to hear that.
I feel like the real metalheads are the ones that are open to other people exploring that genre. Like we're very welcoming people. And I feel like there's such a hardcore foundation of like, we're the outcasts of society, the metalheads, the nerds, the gamers, and I feel like when people kind of try and gatekeep, it's so against the grain of what it means to be into this genre or into this thing, I feel.
That's such a great point of view. And now that you bring it up, yeah, you're absolutely right, because it does go completely against it. So if you're trying to be, Mr. and Mrs. Gatekeeper, it's like, that's not what we do.
Yeah.
It's like if you're going to pick apart like a punk band for being DIY, it's like, that's what punk is. They're supposed to be pressing up their own t-shirts and making their own buttons and, slipping it in a van from city to city. That's kind of what it is.
I see a lot of criticism for what would be called like I guess people creating new music now. I see a lot of criticism, and people say, oh, well, that's not this genre, and it's not, but that's like the beauty of music is, how were all of these genres created? Someone decided to do something different. So if people want to criticize that, that's so anti-music.
Yeah, that's just another good point that you have people that some people they need to put things into silos. They need to put things into these columns for whatever reason. Like life doesn't make sense to them if it doesn't fit into one of these things. It's kind of like, there's a lot of gray out there, and like you just said, there's a lot of things that are new. We don't have bits of these 5 music genres, but here's somebody doing it. And so why do you need a pigeonhole and say, well, this isn't rock, or this isn't jazz, or this isn't classical, or this isn't hip hop? It's like, who gives a shit? Do you like it or do you not?
That's important. It's important to share that with others too, I feel.
It is. And you're also right when you're talking about, with metalheads and gamers and certain folks that are, you're not the mainstream. You're out here on this outer part. And for me, I don't know what it was like for you, but like when I was in high school, I got good grades. So I really didn't fit in with the metalhead crowd because all the metalheads are skipping class, smoking cigarettes over here across the campus. But I found my little group that also loved metal, but then they're in AP classes and stuff like that. And I was one of those people, but I went to a suburb of Seattle. And so that school was super preppy, middle to upper class. My family's middle class. So we had, kids that were getting like a brand new Mustang on their 16th birthday, stuff that I couldn't relate to. And so you had all the jocks and all the popular people were just kind of running that school. So if you didn't fit in, sometimes life was kind of tough for you. And so I didn't fit into that at all. If you can imagine, I had long hair back then. And I was checking out the latest whatever metal thing I was listening to, and I was playing guitar in the band room during one of my breaks. And but if you're walking through the hallways where the jocks hung out, yeah, you kind of had to make sure you had a plan from A to B. How are you going to get from this class to that class if you got to get past these dudes, because they're probably going to mess with you. And I look back at it now, it's like it's all trivial bullshit. But when you're going through it, it's the biggest thing in the world.
Of course, I think it's important not to invalidate anyone's experience, especially with like younger people, because like that's all they know, that's their world. Well, if you're older and you've experienced more, it's just that's different.
Yeah, I don't know how. I was telling somebody that she's got 2 teenagers. When I was at that concert a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, that had all the young high school students at it. I was like, I don't know how you deal with your own kids and all the things they got to deal with now. Social media, phones, all this kind of stuff. That as a parent, I don't know how you keep yourself sane, and also like you just said, that you don't invalidate your kids in terms of what they're going through if they're struggling with something in their school or outside of school. Am I popular? Do I fit in? Do I not fit in? Where's my purpose once I get out of high school? All that kind of stuff. It's just the same things that everybody deals with. But now it's like it gets put on blast because there's all this technology around that. If I was having problems back when I was in high school, other than people around me, nobody knew. But now somebody can sit there and put something on social media about you, or make a video of you when you're fucking around with something, and then you're like, oh shit. It's like, oh my God, that's got to be just nuts for any young person, right? And again, and their parents as well, dealing with that.
I'll never forget. There was I said I'll never forget, but I forget. There was this website. I think it was a website. It was either a website or an app, but the whole thing was that you're supposed to ask. It's like an anonymous asking app. So I think you could do it either based on location or like your age range or your class. There was like groups that you would join, and it was you could post things anonymously to a wall, and then like everyone would see it. So you would see, or like there'd be questions that you could ask anonymously to a person. And looking back on like thinking about that was such a dangerous thing, I think, for kids, for adolescents. But yeah, I don't know how parents would handle that now, because I feel like it's worse. Because when I was in school, like that was the big thing, the big craze, was being anonymous and being able to say anything and ask anything.
I remember what you were talking about when that was like the big thing, because for me, I was kind of like, what is this? I was trying to understand, why are people posting this stuff? I was like, oh, they're trying to figure out, what would people say to that, because it's anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you're definitely right that could go down a real ugly path quick.
Yeah. I was definitely bullied with that, but and I'm not the only, like there were that's a very easy, okay, you're gonna bully someone, that's the way to do it. So I can't even imagine what that's like now with TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. And
yeah, I'm thinking back to something similar when I don't know if you remember when there was MySpace before Facebook and all this other stuff. MySpace was the big social media platform, and so one of the programs that I was responsible for at the time for my Muggle job, the students that were getting kicked out of schools were getting sent to me, and I swear, probably 9 out of 10 times, I have to say, okay, what happened here? What was the situation? Why did you get sent over to my program? And it's because something was said on MySpace. Someone talked shit about me, and then when I saw them at school, I confronted them the next day, and we got into it. And I'm like, that's what, again, for me, being behind the times, I couldn't understand it initially, but they kept coming up again and again and again. So then I looked on MySpace, like, oh, so you can sit there and make these comments and post stuff, and you could virtually talk shit to somebody. But then if it's somebody in your same city or your school, then you go see them, and it's like, what the fuck, man, you know, and like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this whole other realm happened, and it's just gotten worse.
Mhm.
So, man, crazy stuff. But yeah, and I guess again for people out there that are watching, if you have any kind of questions you want to ask Selena, please do so. And I wanted to bring up something, just kind of pop. I have a random mind. With your name of Selena Ivy, I think of Batman. Is that where it came from, or am I just totally reaching?
So yes and no. Pretty much. I said yes and no, but I mean Selena. That's my name. But the Ivy part, it was kind of a play on my name, and then also, you know, the more that I started, I love comics, and I've always been a big fan of DC comics. So the more that I was like putting these things together, I realized, oh my God, that works perfectly. That's amazing because, you know, Selena Kyle and granted, I think I spell it differently. I think hers is with an I, but and then, you know, Poison Ivy. And
Yeah.
but I love ivy plants. I think they're so beautiful. So it just worked out.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking about Selena Kyle as Catwoman, and I was thinking about Poison Ivy with your name. As I'm looking at it right here underneath our screens, I'm like, wait a minute, is that a Batman reference? Is that where that came from? But then that also brings up on the Twitch side of being Kisk Cake. Where did that come from? Am I missing? Is that a gaming thing or?
That was my gamer tag for a long time. And when I was doing the transition, I just didn't want to change it because it was something that, you know, it's kind of hard to find a screen name that is, you can use it universally across, like, it's like interchangeable or interoperable between all the platforms. And Kiss Cake was such a unique name that it was easy for me to get that on every single platform. So now, like, I could say, oh, I follow my everything at Kiss Cake, and you know, it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But it came from Kisk is kind of short for Kiska, which is like a Russian pet name, and then cake. For a long time, I decorated cakes, and I still do, but that was like, and I love cake, but I just put the two together, and I felt like Kiska was, it kind of worked with one, I love cheetahs. That's one of my favorite animals, and a big part of me kind of becoming, I felt like who I am as a person started out from me being a dancer, and the first club I ever worked at was called the Cheetah, and it was a very personal, like, there was just a lot of things that kind of connected that it made it more of a meaningful name to me. So Kiska means like a little cat in Russian, and cheetahs, cat, and yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for explaining that to me because I was like, yeah, I couldn't figure out what that has. I knew that you had a background in cake, though. That part I knew, but I didn't know the other part. So, and you're right. Once you found something that was universal around anything that you put, it's like it was unique to you. It's like, yeah, you want to hang on to that brand because it's so hard to find something. There's like always somebody else that has something, that they've made up, but. Do you still do any kind of the cake stuff, or is that kind of in the past, or just don't have the time?
I don't really have the time, but occasionally I'll do it for either a family member or like friends. I had always wanted to, once I got like established in a place that had a kitchen that I had enough space where I could do that. I wanted to do cake decorating streams. That never happened, but it will, mark my words. But yeah, no, I don't really have time for it anymore. I feel like the adult industry is it kind of takes over. It's like a 24/7 job.
Okay, and we're definitely going to be talking more about your adult work. But before we leave that, when you're talking about cake decorating, were you doing things like I know a couple people actually. One of them locally here was on Cake Wars, and she was doing these elaborate, like turning a golf club into a cake, and I mean, and other kind of things. And my friend Nikki also does similar things like that with a bunch of fondant. And I'm like, how the hell did you make that thing? It looks like a camera, but it's actually a cake. Were you doing that kind of decorating?
Yeah.
Okay. That's amazing. That's artistry in by itself for sure. I mean, trying to do that with pastry.
I've always been very, I feel like I've always been very artistically inclined, and decorating cakes was something that I really enjoyed. I hated baking then. Baking was so not fun for me, but the decorating and like the creation of, the artistic aspect of it was really fun for me, and I enjoyed it. And the way I loved seeing the smile on people's faces when they would pick up the cake or get the cake, and they're just, oh my god, they're so happy.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely an art form, and when you can transform pastry into someone's idea, like I really want this for our anniversary or our birthday or a special occasion, and then like you just said, when they see it, then they're just blown away by what you made. Um, yeah, and, that's. I was actually trying to do an interview with Barbara Ann at some point because she's basically known around here. I don't know what she charges for her cakes, but they ain't cheap. But they shouldn't be based on her artistry with what she does. But that's awesome that you have so much going on in your background, from music and cake and gaming and some of the other things. But it's what uniquely makes you you. And for when you were starting off, like you said, out of high school as a dancer, how long were you dancing before you started to move into doing the adult shoots and videos and scenes and things?
I was dancing for a while. I'm still dancing, but I like the adult film. It kind of it takes over because you kind of have to be almost on call. And then, because I'm from Atlanta and they don't really film stuff here, I feel like I'm always out of town. So there's not a lot of like time in between. But I it was only like right before I started doing adult film that I started doing OnlyFans. So I guess I was doing it for a little while, but I wasn't doing full nude. I was doing very like lewd, boudoir, implied nudity, but I didn't really show anything beyond that. And then it was probably within a few months that I started doing the adult film. So I started dancing in 2016, I think 2016. And it wasn't until really like the past maybe year and a half that I started doing adult stuff. I mean, dancing is adult, but this side of adult stuff.
Okay, and like you said, you're doing OnlyFans content, and then when you start doing adult shoots for studios and companies, what were those first few like? Was it like an easy thing to do, or like incredibly nerve-wracking until you actually did it and you kind of got it out of the way, and then now you're comfortable, or still not comfortable, or it's always different for every performer?
So I had wanted to do porn for a very long time. So even when I was like a teenager, I would film homemade, but essentially pretending to be a porn star. So doing it, like being on set and being on camera for the first time, it felt very natural and very comfortable. Like, it felt very normal, oddly enough.
Okay, well, the fact that you're already almost like fantasizing what it would be like, or manifesting it in some ways, I suppose you could say, in your head when you were younger, and then you actually were doing it. It was like, okay, it wasn't like some big step then. It's like I wanted to do this anyway, so now I finally get a chance to like realize this and see what it's like.
If anything, I felt better about it because I knew that it was going to be better than anything that I filmed at home, and like that was a big part of what I wanted from it. I liked the production aspect of it. Um, so there was that.
Okay, and with the scenes you shot so far, have you done any feature work, or has it been more like Gonzo type of scenes that you've been doing?
Mostly Gonzo. I did work on a feature film, but it hasn't come out yet. I think it's supposed to come out in the summer. And I did that with Less Cinema. The director was Casey Calvert, which was so I've admired her for such a long time. So being able to work with her on that was amazing and exciting. Um, so that's going to come out, I think, in the summer, and that was that's kind of what that's more so what I was expecting the adult film industry to be like. I didn't really know why. I'd never heard the term gonzo before, but um, the something that kind of threw me off when joining porn was how gonzo it was that just wasn't really what I was expecting. I was expecting there to be more people on set. I was expecting there to be like a makeup artist and like a hair person, but in my first few shoots, I think there was no makeup artist. It was, DIY. So that was very different. But the feature film, that was really cool to be a part of and really exciting.
Okay, and I'm thinking with all the artistic background that you have that you've talked about during this interview, do you see that maybe you're going to be leaning more towards wanting to do more features in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to do more features before I even knew that Gonzo was a thing. So I hope that that's something that I can continue to do in the future. That's a big part of why I wanted to join the industry, was because I liked the idea of making like a big production of, something what I feel is sexually artistic.
There's a couple of the folks that I've talked to. One of them is a director. And actually, he's the only director I've talked to so far, and everything he shoots is features. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember his name. I think his stage name is Bloomer Yang. He's I don't know, yeah, I think that's his stage name. And he works for, I want to say Delphine Films, but he's got his degree in film for mainstream stuff. And so when the porn folks came knocking, it was actually, I think, his roommate. They came and said, "Would you like to direct some scenes?" And he said, "No way, I don't want to do that." And then said, "Talk to my roommate," and he was like, "Okay, I'll get in there and do that." And he's getting a chance to do his artistic spin on things. It's just that when you get to the sex part, we just don't pull away the cameras. It's the way he looks at it. So it's like we're trying to create some really beautiful imagery within pornography.
Yeah, I want to be a part of that so badly, because I think that's like where my heart is gonna just blossom and thrive. But then there's also what was I gonna say? I'm so sorry. I just completely lost my train of thought. Doing more of that. I forget. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have brain farts on a regular basis, so maybe it'll come back to you, maybe it won't. So how do you kind of some folks, when they get into the adult industry, they don't get what I would consider the right advice, meaning that you kind of build up like the type of scenes that you do. They just kind of go all into the deep end right from the get-go. It's kind of like, well, now you have nothing else to build to because you just did everything. You just like your third scene was a gangbang or something. It's kind of like you want to keep, almost like a tease. Oh, I'm doing this. Now I'm doing this. Oh, your fans want to see this. Well, I'm not doing that yet. And then you keep on going. Are you kind of building what you do the same way, even if it's just, accidentally?
Yeah, I'd say so. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. So you had mentioned that the bringing like doing more feature films, and I think nowadays there's so they're not as appreciated, and there's not. I think the pendulum, like there's a porn pendulum, and there's like the amateur side, and then there's the feature film side. And I think because of OnlyFans, amateur is so popular now, or like the Gonzo style is so much more popular because it's so straight to the point and direct. But I feel like we're gonna start to see the pendulum swing that way, and I think there's going to be more feature films and maybe more appreciation for the feature films, and I look forward to that. So that's what I was going to say.
Okay, yeah, no, and you're right. I think it's gotten to a point where I was trying to think the first time I saw anything that was considered like Gonzo. I mean, that was decades ago, and so it's kind of like, okay, if that's what you want, fine. I understand why you're doing it, but there can be so much more to it that can actually be even more erotic and more arousing if you give it a chance. And that's where the feature stuff comes in, because if the director and the performers do it right, I mean, I don't think you can get anything more enticing than what some of them do. I mean, that shit is like, holy crap. And, your TV or your tablet or whatever is just like burning up based on how they made this. It was just really amazing. And I think you're right. I think once people kind of give it more of a chance, they realize, man, you can get off more with that than you can with this thing over here that just like, one and done basically. There's more of a build up, there's more of everything. And then once it explodes, man, it's like, ooh.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll also be better for like our understanding of an adolescent's understanding of sex. I feel like there's such a misconception of it being so direct and straight to the point. I'm hoping that like with an influx of more feature films, then people are going to realize, oh, okay, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to, and be patient with the overall results of what sex has to offer.
That's a really good point, that there's actually a thing called foreplay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I've talked with some of the other adult guests, and they talk about how uncomfortable it is sometimes shooting Gonzo scenes, not because of what it is, but because they got to get at certain angles. And so, if you're like in a 90-degree angle, trying to put your leg over here so the camera can get the angle through here, and the guy's maybe this way, it's like, oh, something just got screwed up. Do it again, or get back into that position again. And I know Haley Reid was talking about how directors will bark at her that she needs to moan louder and she needs to do these other things. And it's kind of like, I don't want to do that. This is how I naturally moan or whatever. And it's just kind of interesting, all the tidbits that have come from a lot of the folks in the industry, that's been for a fan, someone like myself on the outside. It's like, yeah, and some of the shoots can be really long. Like you could be like, you might be there, like especially on a feature, you might be there for a while because they're shooting this scene. They got to set up all this stuff, make sure the lighting looks right. Okay, I think we're ready. And then, oh no, wait a minute. And then, go take 15 and come back. And make sure you're hot and bothered and ready to go. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And again, the features really show it. It really pays off. So speaking of with all the adult work that you're in, and you mentioned you want to do features from like sex types of scenes, are there things that you want to do in the future that you're looking forward to doing, something where you have multiple partners, or you do something else that you're looking to fetish things within like a feature film setting, or what are you wanting to do?
Real quick, I feel like I'm about to start coughing, so can I just like take a moment?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna go grab some more water. I didn't expect to go through this as quickly as I did.
No problem. Take your time. Yeah, folks. So I'm glad that Selena's taking so much time, and she's been awesome. And everyone again that's joining us from her channel. I'm Mark from Eclectic Arts Media, based here in Seattle. So if you're liking Selena's interview, I just did one with Marika Hase last week, also in the adult industry. And I have Sky Blue scheduled to come back. She was here almost 2 years ago, and she's scheduled to come this Thursday. And there's a playlist on my YouTube channel that has all the adult interviews I've done. So like I mentioned, Haley Reid's been one. And Jupiter Jetson's done 4, and she was amazing. She's super funny, really, really well read. You would have no idea that she's in this realm. But she also works at a legal brothel as well in Nevada. So she's got a whole different aspect. And she actually broadcasted live from the brothel with permission. So she got the chance to take us around. That was about a year ago. So she grabbed her phone and she was showing us all the rooms and all the things on the ranch. And that was fascinating. And again, everyone that I've done have been really, really fun and interesting. And part of it for me is not only exposure for the guests that I've had, but just to kind of also show some human sides as well. And clearly, like with Selena's right now, we've been doing that. We're talking about all kinds of things outside of what she does in the adult world. So Jupiter, if I could have her back every month, I would. And she knows that, but I have to kind of balance out what I do, and there's other people involved when it comes to like what I want and what they want their clients to be doing. So hopefully I get her back at least once a year, minimally. But I know there's some other folks. I just had Adeline was great, and Kaylee Roses was great. Again, I can't think of one of them that I had where it's like, oh, that interview was kind of so-so, or that person was. No, they've all been great and really fun. And what usually tells me that is people that don't know what they do, they'll comment on it later to me. Like people I know here in person in Seattle will tell me, saying, wow, that interview was really fun. You need to do more of those. And I'm like, well, that's great. Hopefully you got a chance to see all these different sides of this person, and also kind of take away some of that stigmatism of pornography. But I really appreciate everybody watching. And like you said, she hasn't been live on Twitch in a couple of years. So out of the blue, here she is. And it's one of the great things about the service that I have is that the guests can share it out to anything that they're connected to, if it's YouTube or if it's Twitch or anything else like that. And so she's just going to refill her water bottle and get things going since she has been dealing with the cold. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can mention that's come up. But I can also mention that there's a lot of like concert clips on my YouTube channel in particular, and those are just things I shot as a fan, nothing professional by any means. And I have a blog where I put all my reviews of everything, every show that I go to that I've been credentialed, and everything else. So I've got my hand in lots of different areas, and I try to balance it out when I can. I haven't done the adult stuff since I guess that was the end of last year, really. So that's why I kind of decided to do these three, and then we'll kind of balance it out when we can. And see, she's kind of got her stuff back, and so
thank you for being so patient with me.
Oh, no problem. Welcome back. I was just I think it's the teacher in me. I can talk for a while.
That's good. It makes you great at what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. It's
part of what makes you great at what you do.
There's definitely times when I'm thinking about one of the jobs I had. I wasn't even teaching then, but I was supposed to do a segment of training, and something got screwed up, and all these college students showed up, and I was supposed to like teach or do my part of the training like at noon or something, and they all showed up at 9, and the guy that was running it, he wasn't anywhere to be found. So I'm trying to text him. I was like, hey man, you got a bunch of students here that are getting here for their training for the jobs that we're going to be doing in the summer. And he's like, what? They weren't supposed to get there till whatever time. And I'm like, I'll do my piece now that I was going to do at noon. And then after that, I'll just have to punt. But get your ass here really quick, because once I'm done, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I was just kind of grasping at straws for a bit. And then luckily he came running into the building. But yeah, there's been many of those times. And I also work with, not to be talking about me a lot, but work with special needs students. I work with foster care. I've also
that's beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Worked with gang involved youth for about 10 years. So that was my background is definitely about community-based things, working with students, trying to help as much as I can. I don't do that now because I think I've done enough of that, to be honest with you. But I will always have I don't want to call it a soft spot, but I always have an understanding of different types of populations and different types of people, and empathy, I guess, would be the right word for working with different populations of folks. So when I come across them in regular life, I'll usually people on the spectrum. I've worked with some person that most of the other coworkers, they couldn't stand up. I said, you have to understand how to work with this person. It's just something they were born with.
Yeah, no, I think that's so special and so important. I do. I also, in the rare occasion that I have free time, I do Montessori nannying. So, I too work with kids, and especially ones that are on the spectrum. I think Montessori is great for them, but it's very interesting to see how different people handle people with that. You know, it's so it's not for everybody, but it's special when you can.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think it's something where, and I've talked about this a lot. I started doing these live streams on May 22nd of 2020 during the pandemic, and clearly, and I'm not going to get into politics, but there's always people that are going to be on a different side of the spectrum than I am when we're talking strictly about that. And the hard thing's really been trying to learn, even if I don't agree with you, I can still respect you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a big thing for me. And some of these are people that I'm a fan of. And then they'll come on, like we did pre-show before we go live, and they're saying stuff to me. I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize you have that point of view. And I'm not about to get into a debate with you because we're going to go live, and I don't want to be like adversarial or whatever. But yeah, when it comes to other populations of folks, I definitely have. I wish there was just a little bit more grace and understanding from everybody of somebody that's just somehow different than you.
Just people. There needs to be a greater understanding and more empathy towards people.
Yeah, and even, I mean, this kind of goes back even to like if you're a sex worker, how misunderstood are sex workers? Completely misunderstood. And how many times will people at least take the time to get to know somebody and hear what they have to say who's actually in that particular industry that maybe you already have passed judgment on or have an issue with or whatever it is. A lot of times people won't do it, and it's like, well, that's really that's unfortunate, because if you took some time, you'd kind of find out, oh, this maybe isn't what I thought it was, or I really like this person. I mean, I may not like what they do, but I still like the person. Again, I can respect what they're doing and why they do it. So okay, at least we're getting somewhere, instead of dismissing them and just going over here. I don't like you and I don't like what you do, so F you, and then walking away. We definitely have dug our heels in at times, just as a society. But I don't know. there's some people I've come across, and man, you're making it really tough on me to try to preach, walk that walk that I talk. But no, I'm gonna keep trying. Because I realize they might be looking at me the exact same way. Man, I didn't realize this guy was, maybe leaning too left or whatever. And it's like, well, I have all kinds of different opinions of things. So you're gonna sit there and respectfully listen, or are you gonna sit there and argue with me about it? Because if you're gonna argue with me, I won't want to bother. But if you want to have a discussion, we can have that. That's fine. So, and that's I have no experience with Montessori. I know what it is, but I have no experience. So, and you're right. For students that are on the spectrum, that type of teaching is really, really beneficial for them. Is that something that you ever thought about trying to pursue a little bit more, or just something just kind of okay?
So I actually, it's hard now. So this isn't necessarily something that I knew that I wanted to do. Like, porn was something that I knew that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to try it. Whereas growing up, I hated kids. Like I was that teenager. I wanted nothing to do with them. And then the more that I would be, I guess, so the more that I have family members and they had kids, so like being around them, it made me like realize, oh wow, okay, they're just misunderstood. And I kind of it made me realize, how can I, if they have me watch their kid, how can I be better? And then I started doing research and just like trying to find different just understanding. So I like to read child psychology books because I like to be helpful towards children. But that was kind of while the adult thing was going on, which are two very combative fields, I think, with themselves. I would like to, at some point, be able to fund a Montessori school in probably Vegas or something, because I feel like there's everyone's in the adult industry in Vegas, whether it's gambling, or whether it's porn, whether it's dancing, like there's so many, and there's not a lot of Montessori in Vegas. So I would like to get to a point where I can either build a school or maybe like anonymously fund a school, because obviously that'd be a very difficult thing given my current the current pursuit. I think yeah, I'd like to do more there in that field.
Well, I think what's interesting about what you just said is that I wonder, especially if you pick like you said, if you pick Vegas, are there enough performers or just adults down there, if it's dancing or if it's porn or if it's bars and clubs or whatever, that have kids that could be enough to do to go to your school, especially like say it's a charter school, so you have, I don't know, say 50 kids or something inside that building, where you wouldn't have to hide what you do because they have a similar background, the parents do, and that way it could be like, hey, I understand you want this kind of education for your kids, and it's hard to find it because of what you do or vice versa or whatever. But here's what I'm starting, and here's why I'm doing it, and I know exactly where you're coming from because I have the same background.
Especially working in a strip club for as long as I have, so many of my coworkers, they have kids, and to see them that they can't, like, if you can't go home and talk about your day to the people around you, that's a really big deal, I feel like. So, and unfortunately with that, and there's a lot of single moms out there who they can't necessarily afford like tuition of a private school, which I think most Montessori schools are private schools. So to know that there's this like great opportunity, and I don't want to call them underprivileged, because stripping it makes good money. I would imagine it's beneficial for a single mom, but there's not the societal support for it. So I would like to be able to contribute to that and help those people out, because there's so many that need that kind of support and need that kind of help. So if they have the place for it, I just think that that'd be really a good opportunity to help people.
Yeah, no,
Kids in need and get a better education, or one that's more suitable for what their parents want or caregivers want.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something, because again, there's unfortunately there is a stigma if like, let's say a public school finds out that there's a single mom and she's stripping to pay the bills, and they might be able to use that as a CPS thing against the mom, when in reality it's like, well, no, my kid, I'm raising my son or my daughter or whoever exactly like I want to. This is what I do to make money. It's over here. So I don't bring that home, and we don't have a pole in our apartment or our house or whatever.
Right.
And so if there was an alternative for those parents to take their kids to go to and not have to feel any kind of shame, not have to feel like I have to hide something, that would be really unique and like you said, I think really needed.
Even the bartenders, get that. Even the house moms get that. Even the security outside, they get that the weight of working at a strip club. And it saddens me it saddens me, because that shouldn't deprive anyone or their spawn or their kids of any opportunity that everyone else is welcome to. It's just not fair.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think it's really commendable that you even have the compassion and the idea that somewhere down the road, I'd like to do this. It may not be right now because I've got other things on my plate, but it's still something in the back of your head that might come to the front of your head at some point. And because you've seen the need, and then you also already have the interest in doing so. So no, that's awesome. I don't think I've ever heard of that. That's why it's unique. So when something's unique, that's an idea eventually to try to make it happen, because people are going to just glom onto it, and then they're going to try to replicate it other places.
One would only hope. I would like that to be a more societal norm, but this could totally flop, and people come at me with a pitchfork saying that I'm sexualizing children. I don't know, just something terrible. But the idea is there, the goal is there. Well, and I hope that people see it from a more genuine perspective.
Yeah, I think if you can back up what your whatever your core philosophy is, here's what we're doing. Even if it's like on a small scale, we're going to do these workshops during the summer, when kids are off from school or whatever, and you already have that set, and then you can say, here's how we're doing, here's our curriculum, here's all our philosophy, here's our all that kind of thing. Then people are kind of like, oh, you're serious about this. It's not just some kind of fantasy idea. It's like, no, you're actually going to do this. Here's how we're going to measure these goals. Here are the objectives. Here's what we're going to be doing, and then just watching it kind of build. So it doesn't have to be something where you just start with a school. It could be a program, and then wow, it's successful. Word of mouth starts spreading. Man, aren't my kids learning so much in that, and they love it so much that we want more of it. We want more. Where's level 2? Where's level 3 of this stuff? And with your gaming background, you know exactly what that means. How do we get to these other levels? But it would be education-wise, using different methods for folks that feel like their kids are just not being accepted the way they should be.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I think that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you for having the wonderful idea and the compassion to want to do something like that. That hits me right where my background is. And I have worked on the other side with at this really expensive college at one point. That's the one I was talking about, when the guy that was doing the training didn't show up and all these students were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen like the privileged side too. I've seen what some of those kids are like, and let me tell you, I don't like them. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, some privileged kids that have well-to-do parents, they're not spoiled. There are definitely many of those. I'm not trying to disparage a whole group, but the ones I encountered, holy mackerel! It's like, you are just awful.
Yeah.
You are terrible.
It's sad. I went to a private school. I went to a charter school. I went to a public school. I really liked the education of the private and the charter schools. I felt like there was such a higher. It was a priority. The education was the priority, whereas at a public school it was the extracurricular that felt like the priority, and there was no like collaboration. Okay, how does this child learn? How can I help them? It felt like, okay, follow the leader, and that's not for everybody. But private school, man, are they full of some pompous fucks. I went to a private college as well at one point, and same thing. It's there's this attitude, and I think that being able to provide I'm trying to think a more welcoming from all backgrounds front for a school, especially for younger kids, would be very beneficial.
Yeah, see, so you have personal experience then about what I experienced.
For sure.
I had families that so their parents were coming from Microsoft, Google, Meta, Nintendo. So they got money, they've got kids, and they are not used to hearing the word no, ever. Mm-hmm. So I want you to do this with your program. It's like, who the fuck are you to tell us what we're going to do with our program? You signed up for us. Here's what we offer. You don't like it, go try to get a refund over there. But we're not changing what we do just to accommodate you. And you'd get this constantly. Well, I've been programming since I was 3. It's like, well, good for you. I mean, it's like that entitlement. That's the word I was looking for. That sense of entitlement. It's just like, oh, I would just grind my gears. I said, do you realize we have people that can't even afford to be here, and they would give their left arm just to have a chance to be in this class right now, and then you come in here with this BS attitude. And that's when I'd have to kind of like not be in those meetings because I would get a little too uppity with people, because the rest of the people on my team were like much more like even keeled. Even though I'm a really laid back person, but you start picking on that kind of stuff, I won't stand for it. But again, that's only some. It wasn't all, but there was enough of them. Oh my gosh! But no, that's. See, this has been such an amazing. I feel like we've done interviews before, even though we haven't. This is so amazing that this is the first one that we're doing, and you've been so good about just opening up about everything and your background and what you're doing currently and what you'd like to do in the future. And I know that your fans through Twitch are like just amazed that, hey, she's back. I've seen a lot of that coming through. I can't believe it's been so long. And then they're kind of like, wait a minute, what is this? Where's the game? Who's that bald Asian guy? And what are they talking about? Education, and, these kind of things, and Slipknot and all the other kind of stuff. And we're talking about cakes and all this other kind of stuff. But no, this has been so refreshing talking with you today. And I'm not blowing smoke because we're live and we got an audience or anything like that. And that's been really, I can usually tell when my interviews are going, if we're kind of like in a comfortable zone, or if we're like, I have to keep working to kind of get the guests comfortable. And it was just pretty natural from the get-go, really. And that's really also a testament to you, that you're open enough to actually talk about certain things, and also talk about them articulately. I mean, really, I don't think that's the right usage of that word, but that you're articulate enough with what you're saying, and you're really putting in some really good thoughts and good vibes out into the world too. So that's always a special treat. Yeah, no, more power to you. I hope that all the things that you want to accomplish, whether it's in the adult world or things outside of the adult world, really work well for you and actually come to fruition.
Thank you. You're very easy to talk to. You're very easygoing, and I definitely see you being a good educator in the way that you conduct yourself, talk to people.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I can tell you this story that I don't know. You still have time. I realize it's been an hour and 42 minutes.
I carved out my day for this, so you can have me for 5 hours if you want.
Okay, I want to be respectful of your time. So when I started teaching, I had a student that was in my class as a 7th grader. So I was in a junior high system, and he came back to me when he was going to graduate from high school, and he moved out of state. He moved down to Oregon, way down in the southwest corner. So I think that was going to be like a 6-hour drive or whatever to get to him. But he personally came to invite me to his high school graduation. So, okay, absolutely. I'm going to make it. I don't care if it's 6 hours. I will drive down there to make sure I make it. And then he got engaged, and he was like, Mark, I know you're a photographer. So you want to shoot our wedding? And I'm like, well, one, I need to talk to your fiance. I don't need to talk to you, because I think he's going to have some real distinct opinions about who's getting hired as the photographer. So I met with her and him, and they wanted to have me come shoot their wedding. So it was such a trip, because I'm watching him and his bride to be, and I met his mom several times, obviously back when he was in 7th grade, and here he is getting married. And I'm the teacher that he used to know, and I'm taking photos of his wedding. And his best man was another student that I hadn't seen since he left junior high. And I didn't know he was there. I'm like, you look really familiar. And he was like, Mr. S, it's me. It's Troy. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so crazy. But it was also really cool that I had because a lot of times as a teacher, you don't really know what kind of impact you've had. You just hope things work well for the students, every student that you work with. But when something like that happens, you're like, okay, I guess, I did something right to help with the path that this young man was going to be on way back when, because he's still staying in contact with me.
That's so special.
It is. I'm not lost on it. And his mom, I remember, wrote my principal a letter after the high school graduation thing about the impact I had on her son's life, the fact that I drove down there for the graduation, I was there for the dinner that they had, and all these other kind of things. And so the principal came to me and said, Mark, this is just another example of why you're doing such a great job. And I'm like, well, that's wonderful, but that was the year that I left teaching.
Why did you leave teaching, if you don't mind me asking?
Honestly, at that point, I'd been in a public school system for I say only 7 years, but that's when I was working with special needs students. And I was getting burnt out in the building and the politics that I was in. And one of my friends was working at a computer animation type of studio, and they needed an audio engineer. And he said, hey, I know a guy. And I was like, I didn't study audio engineering. I make some, recordings and demos and that kind of stuff. He said, that's all we need. So Mark, why don't you, come jump over here? If that opportunity had not been there, I may have stayed with teaching a little bit longer directly in that district, or at least maybe moved to a different school or something. But that showed up, and it was like, yeah, you're going to work with sound and make songs and stuff for a living. And I'm like, this sounds too good to pass up. So that's why I jumped. And unfortunately, that job only lasted like a year before they had to lay about half the company off. But it was fun while I did it, because it was like a 180 coming from the teaching world to, just you show up at 10 a.m. and that's considered early. I remember my first day of work, I got there at 9 and the door was locked. And I'm like, where is everybody? And eventually one of the owners showed up at like 9:30. He's like, oh, Mark, what are you doing here so early? I'm not early. This is late. Where is everybody? Said, oh, we don't roll until later. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm in a different world here. And then they had what they called Fat Bastard Fridays. And that's when everybody stopped at 5 p.m. And it didn't matter if you drank, if you didn't drink, whatever your deal was. They always had beer, wine, and some other kinds of alcohol available to the entire staff. And you just kind of had happy hour. So you can imagine going from the teaching world where like you're not going to be drinking alcohol on campus ever to, hey, Mark, you want another beer? Hey, do you want a shot of this? I'm like, what the hell's going on here? My friend's laughing at me, the one that got me the interview, because he could see that look on my face like, I'm doing something wrong. I don't know if I should be touching this stuff. And then, of course, like I used to, because there's yeah, Mark, we do this every Friday. I'm like, every Friday?
It's funny, you had that moment of, are they testing me right now?
Yeah, I really thought I was going to get in trouble. Say, no, I'm good. I'll have a Coke instead or something that doesn't have alcohol. But it really wasn't like working in terms of the stuff that I was responsible for at that computer company. And apparently some of that stuff's still online. That's what I was told. So some of the stuff that I had done is still there. So this was like the early days of like webtoons and stuff like that. Before it became like a normal thing. So we were working for some companies out of LA, and probably the biggest account that we had something with Sony. We did Madonna's music video had come out, and they wanted an animated version of it. So we ended up animating that whole thing, and then I had to do
really cool.
It was. I remember I had to do all the sound stuff for that, and after a while, I got really tired of watching that video because I had to keep listening to the sounds. But once we got the animated version done, I was like, oh, this is really cool that I was, I got to be a part of something like that related to her. And then I did go back to teaching, but in a different form. I was working at a nonprofit, so I was paired with the Seattle School District, but I wasn't directly in a school. I was in a different type of office that's when I had the inner city gang involved youth that I was working with that got kicked out of their various schools. And that was a long time. That was for 10 years. So you put that plus the public schools, that was around 17 years total. And then when I worked with foster care children, I was an educational advocate for the entire Snohomish County. So Seattle's in King County here, and then Snohomish was right above it. It's I want to say the second largest county in Washington State. But anyway, I got to be on the other side of the table. So any student that was in foster care that was put onto my caseload, they're entitled to certain things with their programs. And some of these poor kids have been bounced around. I mean, like literally 50 different homes. I mean, just constantly. So they have no sense of anything. So naturally, they're going to fall behind in their academics. And so my job was to go into the schools and make sure that they got everything that they're entitled to legally. And some of the districts, no problem. They couldn't wait that once I got there, want my help and all that kind of thing. And then some of the other districts dig their heels and would fight me every inch of the way, saying we can't provide that, we don't have the money for it, we don't have the resources. As the law says this is what so and so's entitled to, and if you want to go 15 rounds, we'll go 15 rounds. But in the end, I'm going to win because I have the law on my side. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to do? And some of them, they didn't care. They're going to okay, let's glove up and go 15 rounds. And I'm like, God. But it was easy when you saw the kid. It's like, okay, I know what I'm fighting for, so I'm going to get in there and do it. And
that's beautiful.
Well, I appreciate it, because when you're in those moments, you kind of feel like you're your own little island, taking on the world. But when you know it's the right thing to do. So it's similar to what you had said earlier about seeing some of the things, if it's coworkers or people getting misjudged, or their kids being misjudged. I've seen that stuff, and I've been one of those people trying to advocate for those folks. So that's why it kind of gets into this soft spot for me when you're talking with Montessori and potentially in the future, which you'd like to do. We need more people that think outside the box in the world of education. We absolutely need it. And there's too, like you said, when you're doing public schools, charter schools, and public, they're trying to make you fit into a box. And if you don't fit it, they don't care. They don't sit there and adjust it. The other ones try to, but we need it across the board. We need it for everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm off my soapbox now.
No, I'm all for it. All for it.
But yeah, I've had people ask me about my interviewing style as it's developed over the years, and I always talk about, well, a lot of it's my professional background, things I've done. I've had to have really, really tough conversations with people over the years that I won't talk about now because that's not legally responsible. But it's just that those kind of conversations help me have conversations with other people and also be sensitive to it too, depending on what they bring up. Some people have divulged some really, really, really sensitive things that I'm like, wow, I can't believe they actually said that. So then in my mind, if it's live like this is, I'm thinking, how do I approach this now? They just opened their heart and poured it all out. How do I figure my way through this, in a supportive way, in a way that they felt heard and that I totally understand. I don't understand necessarily, but I will empathize with what they're going through, or what they had gone through, and then try to figure out these other pieces to build from. And that's, I don't know, I guess this is interesting. It's kind of turning into a little bit about, what makes me tick.
It's fascinating. I've done a handful of podcasts, and I really, like I said before, I really admire the ones that are more, they're more personified, in a sense that, there's some interviews, they ask you the same questions of like, okay, what's the worst thing you've experienced? And it's just like, that's such a bullshit question. It's because you don't ask that about anyone. What's the worst part of your job? People just don't ask that. So, and I think you're helping build that bridge to kind of normalizing adult entertainers, and that's important.
Well, I appreciate that as well, and that's one of my goals when I interview people. Well, one, just anyone that I have on. Hopefully, I want that they come across good. I want to make sure that I'm not trying to get clickbait stuff. I'm not trying to ask you bullshit questions about what's the worst part of your job, or even things like when did you lose your virginity, or stuff like that. I'm like, no, that's not. We don't need to go there. It's been said a million times, and also the answer is just like, that has no bearing on anything, really.
Who does that benefit?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't benefit anybody. And especially when I started, I watched other people's stuff to kind of see, so what do these people do? Look at all the followers they have, or all the subscribers they have. And some of them say, wow, that's a really good interview. I like the style they're doing. But some of these people, I'm like, God, I wouldn't, if I was the guest, I wouldn't want to talk to you after like 5 minutes of you, the kind of questions you're getting asked.
Yeah.
I told the story that when I was interviewing Doyle from the Misfits, I don't know if you're familiar with that band at all, but they're an old school punk band with Glenn Danzig and all that. But Doyle has his own band called Doyle that he does, a solo band. And there's 4 media members outside of the tour vehicle here in Seattle. And I was number 3. And the second person that was on there, we got 15 minutes each. He was only on there for maybe 5 minutes and he got kicked off the bus. And so I'm like, what the hell happened? The tour manager comes out and says, Mark, make sure you don't talk about this, or this. And I'm thinking, great. Now he's known to be a pretty tough interview anyway. And then now he's pissed because of whatever happened. And the tour manager told me that guy kept trying to get he's basically trying to goad him, trying to bait him into these questions with these, these shitty questions. They got shitty answers that he can put on the internet and social media and say, oh, Doyle said this. And here's a quote from him. And so, yeah, sure enough, I sat there and I'd never met the guy before. And he's just looking at me kind of like, are you just like that asshole that, we just kicked off the bus? And I'm like, well, hopefully you find out that I'm not, because I don't know what he said, but that's not my intention. My intention is to get a good interview. And again, hopefully that you come across the right way. And if you're not, then I'm going to try to push you a certain direction so that you do come across good to people. And sometimes people just put their foot in their mouth and I can't do anything about it. So it's like, okay. But luckily I've interviewed him 2 times after that. So he liked our
So it went well.
It did. Yeah. And to the point now that he just likes to fuck with me basically when he sees me, because he knows he's from Jersey. So he has that kind of attitude to him. And if you can't dish it back to him, you're going to have problems. And that's what people don't understand. So, oh, he's really a tough interview. He doesn't say much. He doesn't talk a lot. He's got an attitude. It's like, no, you just need to be well researched and you need to understand his sense of humor. And if you do, you'll be okay. If you don't, then you're not gonna last long.
The cultural humor, I find that very interesting because people from New York, New Jersey, they have a very different style, but then like the people in the UK, they have a very different style, and it's just kind of funny how I find that interesting.
Yeah, no, so do I, and
especially in your line of work, like important to be aware of.
And doing like a live stream now versus doing something in person. So like if you and I were doing something at a convention, it's very, very different because there's an energy exchange that happens when you're right in front of somebody. It happens this way too, but it's a different type of energy exchange. And if somebody doesn't like what you said, they can literally, they can grab you, they can do whatever they want. They're not, there's nothing you can do technically here. But if I'm there, especially when you're in their world, sitting on a tour bus or wherever you happen to be, I don't understand the mentality when you're not going to try to do your very best to be as professional as possible. And again, make them look good and do your thing. And when it comes to like people from other countries, sometimes I have problems with accents. Sometimes I can't understand somebody, what they said. So then I feel stupid. Like I have to say, can you repeat that please? Or pardon me, excuse me. Usually they're kind of like, they'll be happy to say it again, but if you keep saying it multiple times, then they're kind of like, what's wrong with you? My accent isn't that thick. But the live streams have been really wonderful because I get a chance to talk to people literally from around the world. I mean, even my video intro showed people, Australia, UK, Germany, all these kind of different accents, and their senses of humor, very different.
It's cool. People are cool.
And I think people in general have the capacity to be cool and to really try to change where we're at in this world. They just need to tap into it. And I'm kind of curious. I'm sorry, I'm switching gears, but your background that you have. I see your name, and you have some ivy there. Is that like a folding
It is. You do not want to see what's behind the curtain, okay? It's laundry piled up on the bed because that was my that was my chore for the day that I didn't get around to as soon as I had hoped.
Okay. No, that's I totally understand. I was just trying to see like what is going on back there.
Yeah, it's just a little one of those room dividers.
Okay. All right. And just letting folks again know that all you that are watching, if you have a question for Selena through Twitch or through YouTube, get it into the chat as we're getting close to winding this down. And I see like when you went to refill your water bottle, people are saying that we need you back, and I'm like, okay, I'd welcome you back anytime.
Thank you. Sorry, someone commented on my Twitch. It's actually all the victims back there. Like I have a bunch of bodies behind. It's my torture chamber, but you guys are supposed to know that. So
yeah, this is live, people. We can't talk about those things here. Do you have any interest in like what? Let me ask a better question. What kind of films do you like? Movie films do you like to watch?
I really like psych thrillers, like things that kind of mess you up a little bit in the head, like Fight Club. That's a great movie. I really like anything by Ari Aster. I like kind of messed up stuff, like horror, kind of brutal. Like I said, and any sort of psych thriller. Triangle, that was a good movie that I really like. Supposedly it's like a movie called Groundhog Day, but I've never seen that. So.
Okay, yeah. So I'm writing Triangle down. Groundhog's Day. Yeah, that's definitely an older film with Bill Murray. It's a comedy where his day keeps repeating over and over again.
Okay, so it's like a horror or like a psych thriller version of that.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned the word horror, and do you like all different types of horror films, or just certain ones that that are brutal, or you like the ones that have more of like just a creepiness to them?
I think I just kind of all of it. I've never been huge into the slasher films, not for any particular reason. Like I'm not squeamish or anything. They just don't really appeal to me the same way. I think the realism of something that's more psych related is more terrifying to me. Like it hits me a little deeper, which I think that's the point of, in my opinion, the point of movies and entertainment is like how it affects you. That's like a good movie, it affected you in some sort of way or like had an effect on you. So not to say that like thrasher or what it is, slasher movies, not to say that they're like bad movies. They just they might affect people differently, but since I'm not squeamish, they don't really affect me, I think, the same way that in the way that the director intends.
I love how you described the difference of what you like and what doesn't necessarily work for you, even though there's nothing wrong with it. Like you said, it just doesn't work for you because you're not squeamish in terms of slasher films. Something that's more realistic, it's much more horrifying to you because then it starts to seep into your consciousness, and like I said, it affects you in a certain way. Then okay, there's some level of entertainment going on here because I feel this way when I watch that. I definitely grew up with horror films. I've covered some horror conventions here locally. Definitely, now that I'm doing all this film stuff, I get a lot of horror films sent to me, and some of them, and they're like super low budget, no budget sometimes, and they can still be good. But I like both, and that's why when you mentioned that, I was kind of like, I wonder what kind of horror films, or you're talking about like psych thriller type films.
I like Tarantino. He's one of my favorites. That's such a basic answer, but A good director is a good director. Good movie is a good movie.
Absolutely. Yep. And one thing that I like about Tarantino is that he's really, really open about his influences. He doesn't try to like pawn off everything. Oh yeah, I came up with this. He's like, no. He'll tell you all the films. Yep. I say I used to watch these Hong Kong films. I used to watch Lady Snowblood. I used to watch this, and that's why I took some of these ideas to make Kill Bill, or something like that. So okay, cool. At least you're owning up to it. Plus, he worked at a video store when he was coming up and everything, so he's constantly watching films all the time. It kind of sounds like how I was back in the day. But that's interesting. Some of the things that you brought up during this interview would be almost like ideas, like especially depending on how long you stay in the industry, and if you keep doing feature films, how can I take some of these concepts that I have an interest in and put it into the adult world in a feature film setting?
Yeah, that's a thought of mine.
Yeah, so if you have a psych thriller concept, and then there's sex scenes within it, that could easily work. And especially like some folks, they get behind, they make their own production companies, they have much more control over what they do as well.
I think, I don't know if I would go the horror route with it, but I think I'd have an eye for something good.
Yeah, well, and I could also see like you could use your gaming background into the plot of an adult film. It's a feature film for sure.
That'd be cool. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and I don't even mean a knockoff. I mean, especially like if you're completely like almost like cosplayed out, like you don't look like this. You have different hair, different everything, as a character. And I could see that working really well.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think as far as I think, okay, well, my goal for now with porn, at least as far as the feature films go, is to just get back there. Step one.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And it's interesting too because there's so many performers that come into the industry, and so depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get out there, and you have a publicist and where are things trying to go, and if somebody doesn't, if you disappear for a while, then other people start coming up. It's just the nature of the beast, really. And so if you already know. Yeah, I've seen the people talking about this. You already do a lot of cosplay, so it's like that would be second nature for you then.
Yeah, I haven't done it in a long time, so it's weird to like think about doing that again. But I mean, half my closet is just costumes, and they've just been stacked in boxes for X amount of time. They've been handy for doing OnlyFans content around Halloween time, but that's all they've been put to use for the past couple years.
Okay, what were those when you're using or when you were cosplaying? Were most of those things that were coming from the gaming community? Are they coming from anime? Are they coming from comics and other things?
Mostly comics and gaming community, and probably movies. I think like shows. I used to do, I would call it Costtober on Twitch, and October. I would every single day that I was streaming, which was just about every single day, I would have a different costume every day of October.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
That's dedication.
Yeah, that's especially if you ended up doing it like literally every day. That's 31 days.
I think the most I did was like 24 or 25 days. There's a lot.
That's still a lot. That's still a lot. That's cool. Did you ever cosplay at conventions?
No. Well, okay. So the very first AVN I ever went to, I did. So I have like stripper cosplays as well, which I'll wear when I'm dancing during October. Same thing. I'll do like I'll have a different like just a slutty version of the costume, but every day that I work at the club for October. And one of them that I would wear to AVN was Wonder Woman. So that was one. And then I did Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, like a stripified version of that. There was another one. There was a third one. I think I did a maid and a schoolgirl. Those are kind of basic. And then the last convention that I went to, I put together a little cowgirl outfit. That was fun. I think that's kind of it. I haven't done a lot of the cosplays for conventions.
Okay, but it's great that you have that to pull from if you want to. I mean, you have it as an option, because some people don't. They don't have that option. Seeing what your followers saying here. Okay. Yeah, so the college that I worked at, most of those folks, that's where so this is like, I started there in 2015. That's where I first learned of Twitch. I didn't know what Twitch was, and all of them had a Twitch channel. They're like, oh, Mark, you need to make one. And they're all gaming, though, on it. And then obviously it's blown up into all kinds of other things that people use Twitch for. But then most of them, I'd say most of them cosplay. So they're over here when the big Comic Cons here in Seattle, Emerald City, SakuraCon, they're definitely there. And some of the stuff that they're making is just spectacular. It's like, and they're putting hours and hours and hours into the stuff that they're making, and they come, especially October, even if they're working for me, working a shift on campus, and they go, "Is it okay if I dress up?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, you can dress up." And they come in with this elaborate thing, and I'm like, "Holy shit, that's amazing!"
That's exciting.
Yeah, and then me looking at them and thinking, wow, we need to do a photo shoot. That's what I'm thinking with my background. What are you doing on Sunday? Just go out here and I'll bring my gear with me. And we did do one of the gals did the character of Death, from the DC comics and Sandman and all that. Yeah, she was Death, so we did a photo shoot of that, which was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I also remember she said she was hungry, so why don't we go to lunch when we were done? I was like, "What do you want to go? Take all the makeup and stuff off?" She said, "No."
It's because you put so much into it. It's like it hurts to take it off. Like,
yeah, no, you're right. We went to this diner that had a lot of older folks in it, and they're just like, what the hell's going on over there? But yeah, and she's to this day she's still doing. I just saw some of her stuff online. Some of the costumes she's been working on. It's like, wow, she's still doing that stuff, which is awesome.
Especially when there's makeup involved. I used to do special effects makeup for a period of time, and that was kind of like a goal of mine. I wanted to do like horror special effects for TV and stuff. I just never went down that route, but I would do. There was one specific cosplay that I did, which was there's a game called Rainbow Six Siege, and they have like this. It was I think it was a Halloween thing that they were doing, but all of the characters got like zombified, and one of my mains, a character in Operator that you can play in the game, she had like this whole all the face, like the zombie face, and it took me probably 4 or 5 hours to do that makeup because I did like all the skin peeling and the scarring, and it was just a very intense process. And after I was done streaming, it was just like, well, now what? I don't want to take this off, but at the same time, you want to peel it off because it feels very uncomfortable. But so what goes into it? It's such a process. So her wanting to not take it off, I get that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example of once you spent literally hours on something, it's like, well, no, I want to let's figure out something else to do with this. I don't want to take this off yet. Plus, it's kind of, I suppose, it's also fun being the character too.
Yeah, it is.
That's why you do it. I think Halloween used to be my favorite holiday as a kid, even over Christmas. It was always my favorite because I could dress up as somebody else. I think that's what I kind of liked it. So I was 3 members of Kiss as a little kid.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then it came full circle. So when I when I first started teaching, I met another guy, and actually he was in our department. He was also a Kiss fan. So of course, at Halloween we got two other members, and we had four of us. So then we did the whole band. So I finally got to be the fourth person that I had not done as a kid. So I got the whole gamut of three kids, and then as an adult, there I am as the fourth member. And I remember we took the picture in front of the school bus, so you could see the district name behind us.
That's adorable.
Yeah, did that. Did The Crow a few times when I was in the school district. I was way into the comic book before the movie came out, and then of course I loved the movie, the first one that came out. And back then, people were like, "What, are you a clown?" They didn't understand what I was because nobody knew what it was until the film came out.
Yeah.
So I would be in makeup all day at school. Doesn't that itch? It's like, no, if you get professional grade makeup, it won't itch that bad. It's the cheap stuff that starts to go like this. But then you'd be up at like 4 a.m. actually applying all this stuff because it takes so long to do it before you show up at the job. But anyway,
That's
Selena,
so cool. I love that.
Like people are saying, people that follow you, some people that follow me, seems like they really, really loved having you here. I know I personally loved having you here. This has been an amazing conversation. And if you are open to it, no pressure. At some point down the road, I would love to have you come back, and we'll do a part 2 and kind of see what's new with you. And then I'll also give me some time to come up with other things to ask you, because now I know a lot more about you based on what we talked about today. So I don't know if you're open for that, or you can think about it and let me know later.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun. This was good.
Okay, cool. I will reach out to your publicist and say again, whenever the time is right, that I'll try to. And she understands. We have an understanding now that that I like having guests come back. And from her side, she's always looking for, hey, Mark, I got some new clients. Are you interested in interviewing them? I said, well, yeah, I want both. I don't want just only new people, because I'd like to talk to that person again. So yeah, we understand where we're both coming from. So we're on the same page. I guess that's the way to put it.
Good. That's good. That's important.
It is. So everybody that's watching, again, thank you so much for being here. Selena, you're amazing. I'm looking forward to that second interview, whenever that's going to be. Maybe it'll be, this is what, 2 hours and 16. Gosh, I don't remember the last time I did one this long. That tells you something. That tells you something that I can't remember the last time I did one this long, that it was that comfortable for me as well. That you're an easy person to talk to, and you're fascinating, and you have a really good personality and a good energy about you. That's what I think I like the most.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's
very kind.
Well, again, thank you for taking the time. Everybody in there in the chat, thank you for watching and tuning in. And make sure that you follow Selena on all her channels and all her social media, and check out her official site. Has all those things on it. It's SelenaIvy.com. And that'll get you where you need to go. And if you want to follow me, that's also great too. As Eclectic Arts Media.
As you should.
Yeah. But again, thank you, everybody. And what is today? Today's Monday. See, this is my Friday from my Muggle job, so that's why I'm all confused about what day is it. So this is my Friday, but everybody else, if you have a great rest of your Monday. If you're overseas, it's already Tuesday, possibly, depending. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, and hope to see you again soon.